Hello and welcome to Heritage Matters. I'm Minnie Menon, and as always, we are mainstreaming the discussion on heritage. We start the new year picking up on a theme that was really dominant in the last year, which was really the environment. For once, we were not looking at the damage that was done to the environment, but what we were looking at was really the good news around the environment, because what the lockdown had done was really let the earth breathe and recover from the torture that it had gone through for so long. So what we saw was this amazing display of nature in all its glory. The air was clean, everybody was talking about it. But sadly, that seems to be a memory now because we've gone back to normal. So we thought that this year, let's start Heritage Matters by talking about an issue that doesn't get too much coverage, which is really our natural heritage. When you talk about the environment, you're talking about really climate change, lots of other issues, but we don't look at our natural heritage as something that needs to be studied from a historical perspective, something that needs to be nurtured in a systematic way, and we've not really taken stock of it. And that's exactly what we want to do today by talking about the challenges and also showcasing some fabulous work that is being done on it. Let me start with a very staggering fact that I came across while I was researching for this. Do you know that between, say, 2001 and now, we've lost the forest cover, the size of 4 Goas put together in India? A large part of this loss has not been around the metros, where we think logically that is where it is going to be the worst because of the rapid urbanization. But what's been worse is the fact that this deforestation and the death of the forest cover has happened in areas like the Northeast. In fact, 50% of it has happened in the Northeast, which is really stark, which tells you that outside the realm of what is being spoken about, what is being covered in the media, the devastation is quite stark. So this evening, we want to put the spotlight on this, and I have 3 special guests to talk about that. I have Prabir Banerjee, who joins us from Kolkata. He's a co-founder of Balipara Foundation, which is working on the Eastern Himalayan belt. It's been working for the last 15 years, done some fabulous work over there. And we will be talking about how they're rejuvenating the biodiversity of the Eastern Himalayan belt. And actually, they have created a network of collaborators cutting across countries, cutting across communities. And it's a fabulous example of what can be done when people decide to do something about things. We also have Manu Bhatnagar, who heads the National Heritage Division of INTACT. He's involved very closely with a very high-profile project, which is really the cleaning up and the mapping of the Gangetic stream, which is the mainstream of the Ganga, covering 50 districts, very ambitious. We will be talking about that. And we have Louisa Rodrigues, someone who's been part of Live History India in the past. Her work, and she's one of the rare environment historians in the country, so really lovely to have her here. She's also someone who's done very good body of work around the Western Ghats and the interplay with urbanization, between urbanization and deforestation from the colonial period. Large tracts of the Western Ghats were hacked down for the building of the port city of Bombay. And that also created a huge imbalance. And then the conservation, project really started under British rule. So we will be talking about that. Remember, the Western Ghats are part of the 7 natural UNESCO World Heritage centers or areas in India. So it is of primary importance. But Prabir, thank you all for joining us. And Prabir, one mandate of the show is not to start off with cribs and cribs and cribs, because there's so many issues and so many problems, but we do like to focus on positive solutions and positive stories which can be replicated. So I'm going to start with Balipara and the work that you have done here, starting by asking you, when we look at the larger statistics, it's devastating what we've seen in the Northeast, but Balipara Foundation and the work that you've done seems like an island which is really rejuvenating the area. What led you to this project, and what are the key learnings? Because I'm sure there has been a lot in the last 15 years.
Thank you very much, Minnie, and thank you for putting me in this pedestal with Mr. Bhatnagar and Professor Dr. Rodriguez, and it is very very flattering, and especially because we come from a very unknown, mystical place called the Northeast, which does not have really a large vote bank, so we are by and large ignored by the rest of the world. But we come from an area which has two biodiversity hotspots. And I think I just want to put it in context that, this nature culture divide has been a phenomena for only the last 200 years. Post the agrarian revolution or the agrarian civilization came in the industrial revolution and the mechanization. That's when it happened. But for most of history, nature has been an intimate part of human culture and heritage. The lives and livelihoods of people, their health, their families, everything revolved actually around nature, as it still does, which most people don't realize. The houses we live in are all all come from nature. The clothes we wear are all basically nature, whether it's extracted or not. Even the allopathic medicines that we pour actually have their basis in nature. And we believe that heritage is not just cultural, and conservation is just not ecological. It is absolutely, it's got a symbiotic relationship. It's a handshake. So that is what led us to try and communicate with the local communities, not to teach them, but to learn from them, to facilitate how we can reforest the reforested areas. And that's how our journey of habitat management actually began. We operated we operate under the principles of a term that we have coined. It's called Natureomics, which is the interdependence between nature and economics. And that's what drives our entire Rural Futures program, starting with habitat management, where we actually try and create natural assets through tree planting, which then will convert to natural capital, which will finally lead to our vision and dream of universal basic assets, especially of the forest bridge communities.
Right. I want to get from you some statistics, Prabir. What is the area that you have built out in this rejuvenation program? How many people do you really impact? What is the community size like now?
Okay, let me just start by saying where are our areas of operations. Uh, our landscape for the foundation is actually what we call from the snow line to the sea line, which is from the east of Nepal down via Myanmar down to the Sundarbans in Bangladesh. As of now, our focus has been mainly in the Assam belt, in the Assam, Bhutan, Assam, Arunachal borders. We've just started work in the Garo Hills of Meghalaya. We will be starting in Nepal very soon. But as of now, we are managing about 5,000, as we call, natural assets in about 4,000 hectares of land, of which 2 million of these natural assets have actually been facilitated, their planting has been facilitated by us in the last 2.5 years. We have worked with about 10,000 community members of 7 diverse ethnic tribes, mainly from the Indo-Myanmar and Indo-Tibetan regions. We have generated funds, livelihoods for these people, a little in excess of 1.5 crores in the 2.5 years, because their livelihood earning starts from the day we start our bioresource assessment to seed collection to nursery down to the value chain of plantation and maintenance.
Right. And you also have now a nursery where you are actually developing and creating a rejuvenation program for some of the fragile, plants and botanical, assets of this region. So we will talk about all of that. But let
Yes.
me talk to Louisa. Louisa, you have to look at this deforestation issue in perspective. And, we are dealing with a lot of baggage from the past. Not that it kind of exonerates us from the crises of that is self-created right now. But let's put this in context. When Bombay was being built, and I was reading your book, the devastation across the Western Ghats, all the way from the south to the north, not just in the Maharashtra leg, was terrible. And then there was this realization. So take us through what the damage was. And, people don't realize, and I was quite amazed that 30% of our biodiversity comes from the Western Ghats. It's such an important area. And even now we are finding new species of mammals in this belt. So it's a large part of it is still not fully kind of studied. So I'm going to ask you for your insights on this transformation of the Western Ghats.
Thank you, Vinny, for that generous introduction and putting me across such eminence resource persons today, Peggy and Nagar. Yeah, talking about the Western Ghats, if you go back in time, Western Ghats has been a sprawling woodland comprising a variety of trees, just not teak, but it's jackwood, it's care, it's blackwood, it's babul, and many other types of woods which prevail there. And the livelihood also of the people dependent on this particular forest, so which also led to the establishment of sacred groves, and that's how you have non-interference also of human beings into these groves as well as not cutting the trees. But over the period of time, when you say the entire landscape of this Western India, which comprise of 4 states, that is Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, and Kerala. I'll be mentioning Kerala as Malabar. Entire landscape undergoes restructuring with the advent of the British rule. So British rule were largely the magnitude of deforestation did increase with the advent of the British rule, who carried out several infrastructure projects in Bombay, like the shipbuilding which began in the middle of the 18th century and the early 19th century and went on to 1850. You also have, so even in the early 19th century, you have timber becomes the most important commodity of British state. This was especially because it was not just shipbuilding. The warships were built, the commercial ships were built. Besides that, you have public buildings, you have, including Asiatic Society, Mint, where wood was the main component. So it's not only buildings, but it's the public buildings, the bungalows in Bombay and its periphery. And then by the middle of the 19th century, what you see is also the flourishing blackwood furniture industry, which adorned the houses of all people around the world, many people around the world. So it's not that, but also you find, so even if those ships were built of iron, by the time it is 1850, because of the deforestation and extent of deforestation that had taken place, you have the building of the railways, and railways did require a lot of timber in the form of teak, especially, and babul for sleepers as well as for firewood. So as a fuel for its engine. So the deforestation was to such an extent that you find the first target was the trees around the bank of the rivers, and then they went when that was exhausted, it went into the interiors of the forest. And to give you an example, for one construction of one warship of 76 guns in the early 19th century, you find that 986 trees were cut alone from Calicut. So you can imagine the number of ships that were built, and you have the wooden sails and the ships, and all the intra-city trade and timber certainly led to great amount of deforestation. So one sees the dichotomy over here, that there is deforestation on one hand, but there is development of Bombay on the other side as a result of timber trade.
And then there was a realization that this couldn't go on, and that's when the conservation movement started. And that also has the politics of conservation. And we will talk about that in the kind of form the conservation took in that sense. But Mr. Bhattacharya, when you talk about natural heritage, we're not talking just about forestry or flora. We're also talking about water, and you've done a sizable amount of work on water. I mean, we mapped the Baulis of Delhi, for instance, the historic Baulis of Delhi, which were the traditional waterways, underground waterways. They're all destroyed. When you talk about river systems, they're in many cases dead or dying. There needs to be a rethink of this, because rivers are really the arteries of this country. I mean, that's where most of our great cities are. So I am going to ask you, are you enthused with what's happening with the Ganga project? Is it really rewriting the rules around this? Give us to it, because there's so much of attention on it. We haven't had a status report on what's happening there.
Yeah, thank you, Minnie, for letting me speak on this subject. Rivers, as you said rightly, are the arteries of the landscape. But in India, rivers are not just flowing water streams. They are actually deities personified, and they are cultural streams. And Ganga stands at the top in terms of its sacred aura. which is what makes it such a special river. Apart from the fact that Ganga water has a very specific bacteriophage which kills a lot of disease very quickly. It really is a special water. And this was discovered in 1876 by British physicians. Now, most of the water, in fact, which was loaded onto the East India Company ships going from India to Britain or elsewhere, that was Ganges water taken from the Hooghly, because that water would not become putrid over 3-4 months voyages, unlike any other water. Now, what is happening is that our rivers are in a very bad shape. We have carried out studies which show extremely polluted stretches in most rivers. But worse than pollution is the fact that we are extracting so much of water, diverting so much of water from the rivers, that the flow itself has become anemic. There are stretches in which there's hardly any flow. For example, in Ganga, just below the Narora barrage, there's a long stretch where there's no water until another stream comes in and renews and brings life back to the river. Like at Allahabad, that's Prayagraj now, until the Jamna meets the Ganga is a fairly anemic stream because most of its water has been taken out at Hardwar in the upper Ganga canal, and then at other places also in the Madhya Ganga canal and the lower Ganga canal. And Jamna itself comes to life when Chambal joins it, right? So the flow factor is something which is very important, because without that, you will not have survival of fish or other aquatic biodiversity. You will not have any navigation, and therefore the communities on the banks, they will suffer. And even the quantity and quality of the fish in the river is not going to be the same as before. And with the help of a few slides, I can quickly illustrate what we have been doing. We have been working for the National Mission for Clean Ganga, which has taken a basin-wide approach to the Ganga, not just addressing pollution issues which arise from the main settlements, but the flow factor. And that flow factor depends upon the tributaries. It depends on the amount of water which is being used in agriculture, because we are using water very uneconomically in agriculture. And if we don't withdraw so much of water either from the ground or from the surface, our rivers would be vibrant flows. So a very broad approach has been taken by the National Mission. And one of the things they would like to do is build up a knowledge base around the river. And so we have been interested with the task of mapping the river in the main stem of the river, which spans across 50 districts from the origin up to the delta, and covers a distance of 2,525 kilometers. And we have to look at a width of 5 kilometers on either bank. We are looking at natural heritage, cultural heritage, and architectural heritage. And I would just elaborate a little more on natural heritage. Could we have the slides, please? Screen be shared.
Yes,
so we are looking we are looking at various aspects, and the Wildlife Institute of India itself is doing work in detail on biodiversity in a scientific manner, but still there are several aspects which have not been covered by them and which we are looking at. Could we have the screen share, please?
We will come back because the format is not that of a presentation, but I'll come back to that. But my question to you is that, this has been a high-profile project, and this is the Ganga. So hence, there is a lot of attention. But you have worked on other riverine systems as well. What is the level of damage, and what is the attempt to address these issues? And do you think that the Ganga rejuvenation will become a template for other states and other governments to look at? Because that is what we need, right? I mean, we need something that can be replicated, and the learnings from that can be kind of used for better work. So right. I don't want to talk just about this project, but what can you take from this project, and do you see a change in the way people are looking at it?
See, there is no doubt that almost all rivers have been greatly mauled in the country, and flow is the biggest issue. Streams which were perennial have become seasonal, and streams which were seasonal, they have become ephemeral. Now, the approach which is being taken to the Ganga holds many lessons for what we will be doing to recover or rejuvenate many of our streams. And the main thing is that the focus is now beginning to be supplemented, not just addressing pollution, but addressing the lack of flow. So there have been, studies carried out and attempts made to restore a modicum of flow, which is called e-flow, environmental flow. Now, determining environmental flow itself is a very complex exercise, but having a continuous flow is very essential for the life of the river. Now, the lessons for that have to be applied to other streams as well. Now, one of the basic approaches is that we will work as a basin. We will not just look at the stem of the river. We will look at what is happening in the basin, because it is the water budget of a basin, what comes in and what goes out, that will determine what is left in the river. And if we can decrease what we take out, then we can have more flow in the river. So these are some of the things which can be looked at in the case of other rivers also, whether you have Kaveri or Brahmaputra or you have Sutlej, whatever. You have to come to a basin approach. You are also having to look at floodplain management. In fact, the Ganga notification, which was passed in October 2016, really guards the floodplains of the river, the 100-year floodplains of the river, at least for Ganga, Ganga's tributaries, and the tributaries of those tributaries. Now, this is something which needs to be extended to all rivers in the country. So there are several aspects which can be replicated in other basins as well.
Right. Prabir, I want to come to you. You know what I get the sense of is that while we are doing projects like this, which are big ticket projects, which have huge ramifications, I don't see a concerted plan really. Do we have a plan where we have all of these issues stacked up? We know which are the authorities that are doing it. When you talk about heritage, historic heritage, we do know that it kind of falls between stools very often because of the multiplicity of agencies that have to deal with this. In this case, it's even more complex when you're talking about natural heritage, because you have forestry, you have waterways, you have many state governments, central governments, etc., etc. That's one part of the question. The second is that in pockets, wildlife conservation has worked really well, because I think the campaign to save the tiger has been one of the great successes. But that's really been the one success that we can talk about. Beyond that, I want to know, you worked in this field for so long, how do you assess what we have done as a country?
Well, it's an interesting one, because very often when you talk conservation means wildlife conservation. People forget that the wildlife is just a component of the conservation. It is your ecological conservation, your conservation of your biodiversity. It is your conservation and preservation of your culture, of your landscapes. It's a whole gambit because the livelihoods of people who are the forest fringe communities, for example. Okay, forget that. I'm saying there are studies which show that 50-60% of India's GDP is directly linked to its biodiversity. Walmart had this study where they came up with the fact that 28% of the turnover is because of bees and pollinators. Okay, so I am saying the whole concept of conservation, the landscapes and heritage are so intrinsically intertwined that people do not understand that the approach must be holistic. For example, if you just look at the Eastern Himalayas, it's got over 400 ethnic communities, over 40 dialects and over 300 sub-dialects, right? It's got every single religion of the world represented, from nature worshippers to Judaism People don't know there's a very large Jewish community in Mizoram. There are sacred peaks, there are sacred rivers, there are sacred animals, there are sacred groves, and there are spirits and forests. So when you talk about conservation, you look at, I'm saying, you look at what we call LEVAC. You know what we call LEVAC, which is land, energy, waste, water, air, and therefore carbon. So conservation is not the department of forestry. Conservation of heritage is not the department of Ministry of Culture. But unfortunately, everybody works in silos. The one learning that we've had is that the custodian of the landscapes, therefore your culture, your heritage, are the communities. Communities with their traditional knowledge, which spans centuries. You and I do not think are equipped to go and teach them. We have to learn from them, but yes, we can help them with science. We can help them with documentation to actually make the process easier and faster.
Very well said. And Louisa, let me get you in here. Is this the baggage that we've inherited from the colonial era, where conservation was seen in a very, very staccato, systematic way, without any concern about local communities, about relationships, about the diversity and the interface between culture and environment? Because conservation by the rule book was plant more trees, very often the wrong kind of trees also.
Yeah, right. Very rightly put up by Mr. Banerjee that yes, when it comes to when it comes to environment, it's just not the trees but the rivers, and that's why you see that even in the Western Ghats, it's because of the 300 inches rainfall, heavy rainfall. That's why it was so densely forested. So what happens is, even during the British time, what you see is that the British were compelled to come up with the conservation program because there is absolute timber crisis by the time it is 1838, and British had scientifically proved that the Malabar timber, that is teak, is one of the best timber in the world, even better than even the oak in England, where you can see that the ships that were constructed at that time could last for more than 125 years. And they did classify, that's why Malabar timber, into three types: the first sort, second, that is superior timber, medium type timber, and the low quality. And believe me, the superior timber took 125 years. So cutting off the trees doesn't mean that the trees will again regenerate and grow, but it did have its impact on the environment, on the trees. The tree never could grow to that dimension and that height for a long time. So you do find that British don't pay really scant attention to as far as environment is concerned. They are compelled to come up with the conservation program only because of the timber crisis, the shortage of timber for the construction, civic construction, and that's how you have the conservation program begins. But even when the conservation program begins and is undertaken by them in the form of plantation, only those trees of commercial importance like teak was given priority, and that too also those areas which were closer to the banks of the river. So where is the concern for environment, despite of the fact that the botanists, the surgeons, the conservators were carrying out a propaganda telling the government that please take care of the environment, we have to stop this deforestation and we have to come out with conservation program. But forest was always seen as an obstacle to agriculture. The British were more interested in collecting revenue from agriculture. So you do find that the British conservation programs were quite unscientific also. So I can quote example, as Mr. Banerjee said, that how indigenous knowledge was important. So in the early conservation program in the early 19th century, the local people knew better that terrain, and they would say, yes, we should grow seeds. And the British said, no, grow plants. The trees are being cut, grow plantations. And the initiative were not taken by the government. They gave the task to the proprietors. The proprietors, since they were put under the pressure, they told the people to grow some trees, and that's it. Nothing much efforts were done. So the early conservation programs it really failed. And this explains the reason. So even when it comes to by the mid-19th century, by the 1960s, the experimental plantations which was carried out were also a failure. So which shows the lack of scientific forestry as far as British were concerned. And it is therefore therefore not surprising that the British asked the German forester to come and regenerate the forest of Western India. That's how Brandis come here and then the school is set up, forestry school is set up where they are trained. So
Right.
the
Louisa, that happened 74 years ago. I mean, more than 100 years ago, right? I want to ask you, what has happened since independence? Because from what I understand, we are following the same principles of conservation. In pockets, there are conversations between local communities and forest departments to kind of nurture that. But we have a lot of the baggage of those colonial policies even today in our policy making. And I must also add for our viewers that thousands of hectares of the Western Ghats have been destroyed, even despite the fact that it is a natural UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Western Ghat ecosystem, biodiversity ecosystem, and it's unabated actually.
Yeah. So we have followed the same footsteps of British. The policy of giving importance to commercial trees. So that earlier it was maybe babul and khair and teak, but now it's teak, eucalyptus, hilda, acacia, which is of commercial importance. So we have not changed. Even the Vanotsava, which was carried out during the planned economy, also gave importance to ornamental plants and commercial trees. So we have not really moved out. And even in Bombay, you find several projects which are being carried out, the constructions of the metro. You have trees being recklessly cut down with no paying attention to environment, how important the trees are today, keeping in mind the pandemic situation, how in Bombay, if you see the the forest, that is the only surviving, which is lungs of Mumbai. And I think so it's so relevant and important to us. And therefore, we need to really maintain this delicate balance between the two. The development.
One can argue that it is from the 1990s, post-liberalization, that we've seen the maximum damage to the cities of India because of the development, because of the fact that real estate has become so important, and we've hacked through, not only forests but our mountains and our river streams as well. As somebody who's working so closely with governments, head the Intact Natural Heritage Division. Tell me, how deep is the crisis, and what can be done to correct it? Because I do feel that every city that we go to, I mean, if the green lungs of the city are getting even more shrunk out every time we visit a city.
You asked some very large questions, and so let me just try to take them in two parts. The first part of the question was that how deep is the crisis? Now, you know that we are facing climate change impacts all the time, and extreme events, in fact, are becoming more and more frequent. Let us look at the rainfall pattern as now. Earlier on, we used to have well-distributed and well-dispersed rainfall all over the country, whatever the pattern was. But now in recent years, what has happened is that it is becoming very intense, frequent events. Earlier on, you could see rainfall dispersed over 5 days. Now today, you have rainfall in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And because of the way our cities are laid out, we have built in low-lying areas, and we have concretized all our surfaces. We are facing urban flooding situations. Our cities are becoming warmer and warmer as the climate is warming, but we are also adding to that problem by all the concretization which we are doing, and also by thinning out all our trees. The Delhi metro alone has already cut down 100,000 trees to make its pathways. And every now and then we are hearing so many thousands of trees. In the last 5 years, more than 1 crore trees have been cut down in this country. So how are we impacting the rainfall pattern? That, to my mind, is one of the most serious things which is happening. We are pulling down our various hill ranges in order to convert them into building material. Like, I'll give you an example, the Aravlis which cut across Rajasthan, they actually hold the rainfall bearing winds onto the eastern side of the Aravlis. But when you pull down the Aravlis for making building gravel, then you are going to let all those rain bearing winds go right across towards the desert, and your other side, the eastern side, which was earlier moist, will also become a desert. So we are, facing multiple crises, and these are only two examples. You are well aware of what is happening in terms of air quality. You also know how our habitats are getting reduced, and our the wildlife populations are getting endangered. More and more species are becoming extinct, and you know that we are in the Anthropocene. The sixth mass extinction is taking place of various species. So we are in a very serious situation, uh, multiple crises in which we are living in. And what can we do about it? There are, we could look at implementing some of the Aichi targets which have been laid out, and which require us to mainstream biodiversity approach in almost every aspect of our activities, whether it is in urban areas, whether it is in development, whether it is in increasing our habitats, whether it is in improving our agro biodiversity. So there are so many things which need to be done all at once, and everybody is looking at some aspect or the other. But as Prabir said, we are all working in silos. So when we'll acquire that weight which carries us over the threshold, will it be in time or not? I really worry.
You know, Prabir, I have a couple of very interesting questions from our viewers. One question is quite stark, saying that most people don't even understand what is biodiversity. What do you mean by biodiversity at the local level, right? I mean, for them, land is a piece of land. I mean, there hasn't been, it's the educated, the people who are well aware of the kind of change that is happening and the need to address it, who are talking about this. Now, you have proven that when communities get involved and get reconnected with their environment, magic happens. Now, we need to do that at a larger scale. What can be done? Look at Kolkata. I mean, this year you had a devastating, 2020, you had a devastating cyclone that hit. It's directly connected with what's happening with the Sundarbans and the mangroves over there and the crises that we faced year after year. So this has come home to roost, so to say.
Yeah, it's very simple. Just on a slightly lighter vein, when every single place of worship was closed during the lockdown, your nature flourished, biodiversity flourished.
Yeah.
So I think biodiversity is God, to put it very simply. And even school kids today have forgotten that what the trees exhale is what you inhale, but yet it is never valued.
Mm.
I'm saying the understanding that this is your natural asset and you survive because of this natural asset, and humanity is a subset of the natural world that we live in, is all that needs to go through. It is going through, good or bad, post this pandemic. People have suddenly realized, people are talking about zoonotic diseases, which is very simply the case of you walk into their drawing rooms, now they have walked into your bedroom, and they're probably getting deeper now. So people have suddenly started talking about net zero. People have suddenly started about adaptation and mitigation for the climate change issue. I'm saying, what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is the universe. Biodiversity are all the elements of nature, of which human beings are one part of.
Right.
It is all intrinsically interlinked. That superiority, that the avarice, the arrogance of human beings and the human species, as proved to the world today, will be the cause of their own downfall.
Right. Louisa, what is interesting is when you talk about history and historical heritage, you have monuments, we have museums, you have a place of public engagement. I mean, not that we're doing a great job over there, there are 1,000 problems over there. But when it comes to environment, though the wildlife reserves are doing so well, lots of people are traveling to this. Do you think there is a need as an academic and a researcher who's worked on environment and its history? There's a need for a more concerted effort for public awareness, for spaces where you can understand these problems.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I feel if the Britishers could create a fantastic archives by traversing into the forest of Western India, literally, if I could do research, it's because They have archived each and everything, classified the plant, the name of the plant, the usages of the plant, the utility of the plants. This sort of archive is missing now. I think so. What needs to be done is historians, as far as the environmentalists, should come together and create this archive as far as the plants, the biodiversity, everything for that matter. As very rightly pointed out, energy, biodiversity, it's all living space. So everything needs to be documented, and unless you document it, I think so it's going to be also futile. So what needs to be done, I feel, is maybe in the form of what I talked to is the green heritage. So why not have green heritage? Why not have museum where the information about the plants, historic information and details information, the medicinal plant, because the Britishers had also set up the botanical garden, the medicinal plants that were grown, and every details is documented as far as my book is concerned. So what needs to be done is, today we have the mapping of the trees as such, but nobody knows the history of the trees. Nobody knows the history. What is the historical background of such things? So I think so the initiative should be, so I do feel that even institutions should come forward in creating awareness by not just mapping of the trees, but creating such archive, which is so important to creating awareness elsewhere. And maybe it could be in the form of infographics. So where there's a visual representation of the information which is available as such, which gives which is only remains in memory otherwise. So I only know about it because I've researched it. So how do you exhibit it? Maybe in the form of exhibition. So this exhibition could be in the form of infographics, which could reach out to the people. So if we have exhibition on different kind, let it be also on green heritage.
I have a related question for Prabir on that, but I'm going to take a question that has come, two questions really, Mr. Bhatnagar, that have come from our audience members. The first one is that on specific issues, for example, sand mining and its impact on biodiversity. This is something that I've heard a lot of environmentalists talk about. The fact that we are, like you mentioned, we are cutting down our mountains, our hills, in the name of construction. The second is, of course, even, the dredging of something like the Pulicat Lake, which has resulted in a massive damage of that ecosystem and biodiversity. At every level, you have these little landmines which are going off, Mr. Bhatnagar, and I'm sure at INTAT, and as you are fighting this battle state by state and project by project, it must be very, very frustrating. But my question is, what's happening with the Environment Ministry? Because on one hand, you had a very strict ministry, and now you have, it seems, a lot of this happening without any checks and balances. So where do you see the problem? Do we need a central game plan of this can be done and this cannot? And I'm sure there is one for that.
Well, I'm not so sure whether there is one. Okay, because what is happening is that all the good things are said, but it is amounting to only lip service. Do we need a 4-lane expressway up to Kedarnath in geologically fragile mountains? Do we need these waterways which will continuously dredge our rivers, sands, and upset all the biodiversity which is living in those submerged sands and contributing to the ecosystem services which the river provides? So I'm not sure whether there is a plan, but we may have small sectoral plans. We have a lot of rules and regulations, but implementation is extremely poor. Moreover, we worship in development the god known as GDP. We do not include our natural capital in the ledger. On the expense side, on the losses side, we never show what is going to be the harm to our natural capital. All these large dams which are built, for example, they have a benefit cost ratio which is worked out by the engineers. And if the benefit cost ratio is more than 1.3 or 1.5, then the project gets a green signal. But when you calculate the costs, you never calculate the cost in terms of damage to the areas of submergence, to the mountains you have blasted, to the trees, thousands of trees which you have cut. You have the Ken-Betwa link being proposed, such a huge distraction. The Kane is a small river, the Betwa is a large river. You want to provide water from a small river to a large river. What for? Nobody is able to justify the project. But year after year, it's a huge distraction. So we have interlinking of rivers, a total, miscalculation, which is diverting so much of our energy. You have these national waterways, totally distracting project, which will damage most of our rivers. You have all these in the Ganga basin, the work which we are doing. We have made a map which shows every hydrological intervention which has been made, every dam, every barrage, everywhere, every cut. And as it is, we have 1,000 of them, and yet 400 more are proposed. Is hydroelectricity green electricity? Really? And do we need so much of electricity when we have so much of renewable energy that the planning commission is saying that we don't need a single new thermal power project till 2027, right? So for whom are these things happening? Is it to jack up the GDP? I'll just give you a small analogy. We all look after the elders in our family without any charge to them. But we put those same elders into senior citizens' home, then we pay bills. On that, we pay taxes, and that reflects in the increased GDP. Is that what we want to do? That is how we are treating our natural capital.
It's appalling, really. I mean, and in some cases, it's really the fight between development and, probably I was quite amazed to see that statistic that half of the deforestation has happened in the Northeast, actually, in the last 15, 20 years. And that's very stark for me because, one would assume that a bulk of that deforestation has happened in the metro cities where we can visibly see it. So what scares me is perhaps the damage is far beyond our own vision of it. So what we can see, and we don't even realize what we have lost. Is that
sure? But I am fairly optimistic about the turnaround. I'll tell you what happened is during the so-called insurgency period, timber was the finest form of currency. Okay, so there was incredible amount of logging that happened. Now the same people or the families who did the logging have realized today that even their arable lands are becoming non-arable because of the floods, the erosion, and rocks the size of a one-story house, which are even coming into the agricultural fields. So that inner community build-up of what do we do next is already happening on one side. The other side, I think this pandemic has shown people this whole fear of zoonotic diseases. I think a combination of the two, I'm quite optimistic that things will move forward, especially in areas where land is controlled by the community. Look at Nagaland, for example. His forest cover has actually gone up. And it's been absolutely proven that if you give the custodianship to the local communities, your biodiversity will become a hotspot. And the local communities have the linguistic culture, the traditional knowledge base, the understanding of landscape management, the understanding of kitchen gardens and home gardens and traditional agriculture, the understanding of medicinal plants. They understand the value of nature. As Mr. Bhatnagar was saying, this whole thing of natural assets and nature capital is always ignored because anything standing on the ground has no value. A tree has no value till you cut it down. A fish has no value till you harvest it from the river.
Right.
But the communities understand that.
Louisa, as an environment historian, is it also a responsibility of scholarship to look at not just the past of what has been done, but also try and see the interface between local communities and a changing environment? Because I just wonder, while in the Northeast, the Balipara project is actually reconnecting, the linkage between local communities and the environment in a very concerted way by increasing livelihoods, by increasing the kind of interface between the two. In the Western Ghats, I wonder how much is being done in Maharashtra, for instance. Are the linkages being lost? Because Maharashtra also has the problem of being a very rapidly developing. It's a problem with the environment and the damage that you're doing as you're running ahead in the pace that we are. So do you see enough work in the academic circles that are happening? Because one criticism is that we're always looking at the past. We're not really looking at post-independence history, for instance.
Yeah, even historically, if you see that the Britishers halted shifting cultivation and they carried out plantations, so coffee and tea and rubber plantations is carried out, and such monoculture plantation certainly affected biodiversity. The Britishers also give a lot of incentives, to grow plants and many other things. But in the post-colonial period, as I already mentioned, there has been so much of devastation in the sense it is the same story. It is continuity of the same policy of the British which continues. So you, of course, the Britishers did put restriction on the forest, and you find the post-colonial period we have been far more not only brutal, but we have also put all the more restrictions on the people access to the forest and the area. So you have people are deprived of their livelihood. So unless and until you have something like social forestry, things would really not improve as far as the populace people are concerned. So involvement of the people's mobilization, and making them realize the importance and relevance and how trees are, and growing of these trees also is equally important.
Mr. Bhatnagar, we've got a question from Madhu Bala, who says, shouldn't we also be looking at ritual activities and around rivers and the status of the rivers? That also needs to be highlighted. Because one of the aspects is also, in Mumbai we have the Ganga, for instance, which is a historical water body, a natural water body with great religious significance. It is also a place where every year we hear about how badly the water needs, to be rejuvenated, literally, because of the pressure of humanity really on it, because of ritual significance. Now, these are very, troubling aspects, because on one hand, we're talking about more integration between the community and the environment and letting cultural legacies continue. On the other, we are also saying that, hey, we need now the information that we have, or the material that we have, and the knowledge that this is doing so much of damage, we need to also take an arm's length distance. So how does one grapple with this, especially in something like the Ganges?
There is a huge dichotomy. We worship the Ganga as our mother, and yet we don't hesitate to fill it with muck. Okay. You may have a dead body floating past while you are performing your ritual bath. For the majority community in this country, all rituals from birth to death, they are touched by the Ganga, and many homes have got small vial of Ganga water which they use for their various rituals. So yes, the rituals are important, but for the rituals to retain their significance, we need to maintain that sacred aura around this river. And how do we retain that? Okay, by having proper flow, by ensuring that its water is clean. Now, I just completed a field trip in the districts of Vaishali and Samastipur, next to the Ganga banks. And at least for 3 kilometers, I could see that cremation activities were being performed along the banks, and all the ash, debris, and even half-burnt bodies were being cast into the river. Locals informed me that those half-burnt bodies, they are consumed by the catfish, which is an exotic fish for the river, and then ultimately it all moves into the food chain. So if we have a clean aspect along the rivers, and there are many archaeological sites also along the rivers, you'll be surprised to know that in Prayagraj, you have this place known as Shringaverapura. Shringaverapura is perhaps one of the first water harvesting sites of river sites in the world, I would say, 1st century BC. It's a wonderful system which is very. It has many lessons for even modern water harvesters. So there are many aspects which need to be looked on to keep the rivers pristine. We also looked at several ancient sacred trees along the rivers, in which you always found some deity being worshipped or the other. So there are many aspects along the river which you can reinforce, which you can revivify, and that would then contribute to strengthening the sacred aura of the river. If we cannot have the sacred aura around the river, then it's just a common river.
Right. Prabir, there is one other question that often people have to grapple with, especially in conservation projects around forests. And Furqan Sharif asked this question: should indigenous tribal communities like Adivasis be allowed to stay in forests? Does this harm or help the environment? Now, this is at the center of the debate. How do you extract communities that have actually lived in that land for long, or do you let them continue to interface with the environment that they're used?
They are part of the environment. They've been part of the environment for centuries.
Yeah.
They respect the environment. They take from the environment and they replenish the environment. They know which way to go. They are not blocking environment to build roads and build dams. I'm saying they are part of the whole entire ecosystem. You cannot push people out and create national parks. It doesn't work. It doesn't work anywhere in the world. So the community involvement is a very, very important part of the entire ecosystem. I'm saying, let me give you an example. Forget about human beings. We've identified 12 varieties of trees that do not grow if elephants don't come.
Wow.
Okay. So similarly, there is a lot of damage to the system done when human beings are not there, because it's a mutual respect for each other. Nature, wildlife, human beings have a mutual respect. When you take them out and you try to tell them that you are superior because you've got a frontal cortex or whatever, but don't worry, COVID is coming, it doesn't work. It's never worked anywhere in the world.
Right. No, this is a fascinating subject, and we can, of course, go on for a long time. But I'm going to wrap up, and that's the other thing that we do. We get experts not only to share their experiences and insights, but also their wish list of what they would like to see based on the problems that they face on the ground and the solutions that they know might work. What is your wish list? What are the 2-3 things that we need to do now to get our natural heritage back in the forefront of conversations, and not simply let it languish in the back end, and also to avoid just the lip services we've spoken about and really move to action. So one idea, Louisa, I'm going to start with you. One idea that has come up from one of our viewers is, like heritage walks, there are pockets where biodiversity walks have been kind of organized. Is that the right way to do it, where you get school children to go for biodiversity?
Yeah,
see,
Yeah, so this is what I take from here, from this particular platform. I did speak to my principal also, Dr. Anshri Lokur, that I'm going to start off with what is called as botanical heritage. So every year when I conduct this heritage course, we have different themes like maritime heritage, art heritage. So certainly, Bini, this really gave me a platform to take this ahead as designing a course for the students as well as botanical or natural heritage, where we can have collaboration with the botany department, life science department, and we can take walks to the Maharashtra Nature Park. We can take walks to botanical gardens and to park. I think so that would be a wonderful thing. So as such, so gardens, parks, botanical gardens, as well as even the Maharashtra Nature Park. So I'm really planning to take this ahead. So really, thank you very much.
Outcome of the show, Louisa, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah. And I really hope that we'll also be invited for one of these walks, and we should do a program.
Yes. Most welcome.
Nagar, what do you think needs to be done? If there were 1 or 2 things that you think would make material difference, what would it be?
Would certainly look at the water sector. There are so many things, of course, but let me just take up the issue of water. I think we need to improve our water management greatly, so that our rivers flourish, they are vibrant. And for that, we need to have a basin approach, right, for the smallest stream in the country to the largest.
Right. Prabir?
Well, I think the understanding must come through that what we have today are our natural assets. And if they are assets, they must be valued. And more than a GDP-led budget, like Mr. Bhatnagar was saying, I think maybe it's time to look at an ecological budget. which covers every aspect of life.
I love the term that you have co-coined, I hear, natureomics.
Natureomics, yes.
I've been a business journalist for a large part of my career, have covered 18, 19 budgets of the union. But I must tell you that I think natureomics is the way to be, because without nature, there is no economics. And I think
yes,
we really look at the broader picture. And hopefully discussions like this will get people to think, because the change starts with each one of us. And I think that's the change that we've seen through projects like the Balipara project, which is really the passion of a few people to drive change and show what that passion can deliver on. I think that's fabulous, and it's lovely to have you, Prabir, on the show to talk about it. Mr. Bhatnagar, thank you so much for sharing your insights and the great work that you're doing through Intact. And Louisa, thank you so much for all the research and the fact that you are going to take forward this conversation where it matters the most with students, because they are going to be the change agents of the future. Thank you so much.
Minnie, with your permission, maybe we can invite Louisa and Mr. Bhatnagar to support Balipara Foundation to actually start a Natureomics University.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's really interesting. really. I think so. We should talk also with the economics department too, where we can club history and economics can club and come up with nature economics. Fantastic.
And we support in every possible way. So if you want a platform to talk about that, this is going to be it. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us for a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.